Hey, what's up? How y'all doing? This is another episode of Notable Prisons and the Inmates that Occupy. I don't know if you've seen the channel before, but what I'm gonna need you to do is get them lighters ready, because it's about to be lit. Okay, first and foremost, another thing is hit the subscribe button, drop some comments, feedback. Let me know where y'all watching from. But anyways, we're about to take a trip to Folsom State Prison, which is approximately 20 miles northeast of the state capital of Sacramento. It's one of 34 adult institutions by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. It opened in 1880. Did you know that Folsom is the state's second oldest prison, only after San Quentin as the first? And it's the first in the United States to have electricity. Folsom was also one of the first maximum security prisons. It has been in the execution site of 93 condemned prisoners. And also, I'm sure you guys might have heard this, that Johnny Cash put on 2 live performances at the prison on January 13th, 1968. These were recorded and released as a live album titled At Folsom Prison, and he had written and recorded the song Folsom Prison Blues more than a decade earlier. So it was mandatory that he went there eventually, right? And so also another thing about Folsom, if you guys are unaware, if you're new to the page and new to this, there is some movies filmed there, such as Riot in Cell Block 11, Convicts 4, American Me, which happens to be one of my favorite movies of all time, The Jericho Mile, Another 48 Hours, Diggstown, and parts of Walk the Line, a biography about Johnny Cash, and Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison. Now, I know what y'all are here for. Y'all want to hear about these inmates, right? Hear about the lit inmates. Because let me tell you, we got some notable ones on this list. But first and foremost, let's get to it. Joseph Barboza. He was nicknamed the Animal, right? And he was an American mobster and notorious mob hitman for the Patricia crime family of New England during the 1960s. And he was a prominent enforcer and contract killer in Boston's underworld. Barboza became a FBI informant in 1967 and later entered the Witness Protection Program. He was a star witness in the trial of 6 men being convicted in 1965 for the murder of Edward Deegan. 4 of the accused were sentenced to death, and another 2 men were sentenced to life in prison. It later emerged that Barboza had helped frame the 6 defendants in a case of wrongful conviction for the Deegan killing, which was allegedly actually committed by Barboza and Vincent Fleming. He was shot dead in San Francisco in 1976 after his whereabouts became known to the Patricia underboss, General Anginuli. So yeah, this dude, Joseph Barboza, was extremely scummy. Not only did he frame some people, he put these people on death row for lying on him. Like, that's crazy. Oh, man. Yeah, the underboss smoked his ass. That's crazy. That's a messed up situation right there. Next, we have... I just want to say, much respects to this man. R.I.P. to him. He was a real one. And he definitely led by example. But R.I.P. to Sonny Barger. I actually stay relatively close next to Lake Elsinore. And if anyone's familiar with Elsinore, there's like a big, building out there. Shit, I think it's cool. Like, every time I drive by, I'm like, that's kind of cool. Like, those dudes are just kicking it. But anyways... Sonny Barger. On March 16, 1976, Barger was sentenced to a prison term of 10 years of life after he was convicted of possession of narcotics for sale, 37 grams of heroin, and possession of weapon by a convicted felon. His girlfriend, Sharon, was a co-defendant. Her case ended in a mistrial when a jury failed to reach a verdict. According to the police intelligence reports, Barger has designated San Jose chapter President Fillmore Cross as his international successor during a motorcycle run at Base Lake prior to his imprisonment. Cross was also in prison for possession of amphetamines in 1975. However, Barger allegedly continued to lead the Hells Angels from his cell at Folsom State Prison. He was paroled on November 3rd, 1977, after serving 4.5 years of his sentence. Yeah. And one other thing I would like to read here. So, I mentioned R.I.P. to Sonny Barger. And, one thing that really caught my attention about these notes is, the man, he died with a whole lot of honor and a whole lot of dignity. So much so that he actually penned a message for his people once he left into the afterlife. And this is what it says. If you are reading this message, you'll know that I'm gone. I've asked that this note be posted immediately after my passing. I've lived a long and good life filled with adventure, and I've had the privilege to be part of an amazing club. Although I've had a public persona for decades, I've mostly enjoyed special time with my club brothers, my family, and close friends. Please know that I passed peacefully after a brief battle with cancer, but also know that in the end I was surrounded by what really matters, my wife, Zorana, as well as my loved ones. Keep your head up high, stay loyal, remain free, and always value honor. Sonny, HAMCO. I'm signed at the bottom. I think it's Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club. Yeah, man, like this dude definitely lived a life, well respected all around, and man, R.I.P. to that man. You dig? Next up, we have Edward Bunker, who was an American author of crime fiction and a screenwriter, convicted felon, and an actor. He wrote numerous books, some of which have been adapted into films. He wrote the scripts for and acted in Straight Time, Runaway Train, Animal Factory, and he had a brief role in Reservoir Dogs. He began running away from home when he was 5 years old, and this developed a pattern of criminal behavior, earning his first conviction when he was 14, leading to a cycle of incarceration, parole, reoffending, and further jail time. He was convicted of bank robbery, drug dealing, extortion, armed robbery, and forgery, and Bunker was released from prison for the last time in 1975, which he focused on his career as a writer and actor. Next, we have Thornus Christian Jensen, who was a Danish-American serial killer from Solvang, California. He committed his first 3 murders in the late 1976 and early 77, killing young women of similar appearance from nearby in Isla Vista. His crimes motivated large demonstrations opposed to violence against women and in favor for better transportation for the young people residing in Isla Vista. In 1979, he killed a young woman from Los Angeles. A 5th intended victim escaped with a bullet in her head and later identified him in a Los Angeles bar. And he is serving life in prison. Look at this dude. Looking like he's supposed to be at the beach or something. Next, we have Eldritch Cleaver, who essentially was, he went to become a prominent member of the Black Panthers, having the titles of Minister of Information and head of the international section of the Panthers. While a fugitive from the United States criminal justice system in Cuba and Algeria, Cleaver was convicted of a series of crimes including burglary, assault, rape, and attempted murder, and eventually served time in Folsom and San Quentin prisons until being released on parole in 1968. In 1968, he became a fugitive after leading an ambush on Oakland police officers, during which 2 officers were wounded. Cleaver was wounded during the clash, and a Black Panther member, Bobby Hutton, was killed during the result of the incident. As an editor of the official Panthers newspaper, the Black Panther, Cleaver's influence on the direction of the party was rivaled only by founders Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. Cleaver and Newton eventually fell out with each other, resulting in the split that weakened the party. And Cleaver is a weak individual, extra scummy, extra scummy. Anyone that has that R word attempted to their charges, they are scummy. Very, very, very scummy. But anyways, this dude died back in 1998 in prison or some shit. So, yeah, there goes him for that. Next, we have Alfred Leonard Klein. Known as the Buttermilk Blue Bread Killer, was an alleged American serial killer responsible for murdering at least 9 people. Peep this. This is crazy. This is what he would do. So basically, back in March 12, 1888, in Kansas, he was never convicted of murders as no supporting evidence was found, but he married women on their status, convicted them to will their possessions to his name, and persuaded them to drink a glass of poisoned buttermilk that contained powerful sedatives. After a fatal dose of drugs, a local doctor would issue a death certificate citing the cause of death to be heart failure. Klein cremated his later wives to hide any evidence of murder, and he acquired over $82,000 in possessions from 8 of his wives. Klein was prosecuted for a murder charge but jailed for forgery. He was sentenced to 126 years in Folsom prison. Klein died of a heart attack back in 1948. Yo, I just want to know who drinks buttermilk. Like, that doesn't even sound like something you would drink. Like, ugh. But yeah, I thought this case was kind of crazy when I was reading over it on my notes. Next, we have George Content. And he was found guilty of train robbery at Collis in October of 1892. And Content was incarcerated for 15 years at Folsom State Prison. The following June of 1893, John Sontag died shortly after his 32nd birthday, either of a gunshot wound sustained at the Battle of Stone Corral while in custody in Fresno, and is entered a Calvary cemetery in Fresno. Chris Evans lost his eye and his left arm preceding his surrender. He too was sent to Folsom, where he remained for 17 years. Evan was paroled in 1911 and died in 1917. George Content tried to escape in 1893. Damn, them train robbers are something serious. Next, we have Craig Coley, who was arrested the same day as the murderers and charged with the double murder. The first trial resulted in a hung jury. The second trial in 1980 led to his conviction, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. After Coley lost his final appeal of his conviction, the judge ordered all evidence to be destroyed. During his imprisonment, Coley was incarcerated in a California state prison, Los Angeles County, and then the Folsom State Prison. The dude was wrongfully convicted in the 1978 murder of his ex-girlfriend and her son, and he was being pardoned and exonerated by the governor, Jerry Brown, in 2017. So Craig just came home. Next, we have Chris Evans, who was another train robber. And there's not much to say about this dude, but he robbed trains, and that's what he did. He was a train robber. And after killing a member of a posse outside of his home on the outskirts of Visalia, he fled to Sierra Nevada mountains with his younger partner, John Sontag. While Evans and Sontag hid out in the mountains, the writers Ambrosia Bierce and Joaquin Miller championed their cause in the San Francisco Examiner. The outlaws evaded capture for 10 months, all while being hunted by posses of lawmen, railroad detectives, and hundreds of bounty hunters. They had a shootout with a posse at Young's cabin, which resulted in the death of Wilson, the posse leader. And McGinnis, a former friend of Chris Evans, later John Sontag, was mortally wounded in what is called the Battle of Stone Corral. Damn. Things were a little bit different way back in the Wild Wild West, huh? Next, we have Glenn Stewart Goodwin. In 1987, Goodwin attempted to escape during his incarceration at Duell Vocational Institute in California, DVI, California, and he was moved to Folsom State Prison, a maximum security prison. Authorities believe Goodwin's wife, Shelley Rose Goodwin, and his former cellmate in DVI, California, Lorenz Carlick, helped to plan his escape. A hacksaw and other tools had been smuggled into the prison for Goodwin. On June 5th, 1987, he cut out a hole through a fence wire and escaped into a storm drain that emptied into the American River. Goodwin dropped through a manhole and crawled 750 feet through the pitch-black rain. Accomplice suspected to be either Goodwin's wife or Carlick had left a raft that Goodwin used to float downriver, following painted arrows on rocks that directed him where to go. Damn. And in January 1988, Shelley Goodwin was classified as a federal fugitive for her role in her husband's escape, and she was captured by the FBI on February 7th of 1990. Damn. But he was he got charged with murder, robbery, attempted escape, drug trafficking. And his penalty was 26 years to life, and plus another 7 years in 91 after they captured him. Sheesh. He was about to get away at all costs. Next, we have Charles Jackson, Jr., known as the East Bay Slayer, was an American serial killer responsible for the murders of at least 7 women and 1 man between 1975 and 1982. His more complete exposure occurred only a few years after his death in 2002. Based on results from DNA profiling, he is also suspected of committing several more murders during the 1970s and the 1980s. Damn. He got smoked, y'all. And so his criminal penalty was life in prison. But he died back in 2002 in Folsom State Prison. Next, we have the one and only Rick James. Now let's talk about Rick James for a little second here. By the 1990s, James' drug abuse was public knowledge, known shit. Like everyone knew, dude was in love with that powder substance. He was heavily addicted to cocaine, and later admitted to spending about $7,000 per week on drugs for 5 years straight. On August 2nd, 1991, James and his girlfriend Tanya were arrested on charges of holding a 24-year-old Frances Alley hostage for up to 6 days, tying her up, forcing her to perform sexual acts, and burning her legs and abdomen with hot end of a crack cocaine pipe, and during a week-long cocaine binge. James faced a maximum sentence of life in prison if convicted on all charges, which including assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated mayhem, torture, forcible oral copulation, false imprisonment, and kidnapping. Yeah, Rick James is extra scummy. I was not aware of this, but he is for sure a scummy individual, in my opinion, from here on out. On November 3rd, 1992, while out on bail for that incident, James, under the influence of cocaine, assaulted music exec Mary Swagger at the St. James Club and Hotel in West Hollywood. She claims that she met James for a business meeting, but said that he kidnapped her and beat her over a 20-hour period. In 1998, James was accused of sexually assaulting a 26-year-old woman, but the charges were later dropped. In 2020, the James estate was sued for $50 million by a woman who accused him of raping her when she was 15 years old at a group home for troubled youth in New York in 1974. That suit was later dismissed, but James was found guilty on both offenses, but was cleared of the torture charge that could have put him in prison for the rest of his life. While serving his 5-year sentence at Folsom Prison, James lost a civil suit to the lady, who was awarded nearly $2 million in damages in '94. James was ordered to pay her about $1 million. The hotel and the private security firm were found liable for nearly $750,000 in damages due to negligence. James was released from prison August 21st, 1996, after serving more than 2 years. Yeah, Rick James is very scummy for that much. Next, we have Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer. Let me tell y'all a little something about the co-ed killer. Pay attention. He's about to get it. Edmund Emil Kemper. He was an American serial killer who murdered 6 college students before murdering his mother and her best friend from May 1972 until April 1973. Following his parole for murdering his paternal grandparents, Kemper was nicknamed the co-ed killer, as most of his victims were female college students hitchhiking in the vicinity of Santa Cruz, California. He stands at a height of 6'9", and it possesses an IQ of 145. Most of his murders included necrophilia, with some incidents of rape. And he got sentenced to life imprisonment 8 times on 8 different accounts that are all concurrent. Dude is 73, and he's still serving time at Folsom State Prison for some shit that he did way back in the 70s. Yo, they definitely cooked his ass. And the crazy thing is, he asked for the death penalty, but, you know, at the time, the death penalty was suspended, so he has life in prison. But he's currently in CMF Vacaville right now, though. Next up, we have Suge Knight. Let me tell you why Suge Knight was in Folsom. Let me tell you why. Basically, he was in Folsom for assault charges, and Knight is infamous for his alleged extortion of Vanilla Ice and dangling him off the hotel balcony. So this is around that era, but basically he just assault charges. He got like 5 years, and he was later released. Next, we have Timothy Leary. On December 26, 1968, Leary was arrested in Laguna Beach for possession of 2 marijuana roaches, and he alleged that they were planted on him by the arresting officer. But during this time, he was convicted of the crime. On May 19, 1969, the Supreme Court concurred with Leary versus United States and declared the Marijuana Tax Act unconstitutional and overturned his conviction. So get this. On the same day, Leary announced he was running for the governor of California against the Republican Ronald Reagan at the time. And his campaign slogan was "Come together, join the party." On June 1st, Leary joined John Lennon and Yoko Ono at their Montreal bid-in, and Lennon subsequently wrote Leary a campaign song called "Come Together Right Now With Me." Doom, 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 doom. Is that the right song? But anyways, get this. On January 21st, 1970, when Leary received his 10-year sentence for his 1968 offense with the roaches, with a further 10 years later added, while in custody for a total of 20 years to be served, on his arrival to prison, he was given a psychological test used to assign inmates to the appropriate work details. Having designed some of the tests himself, including the Leary interpersonal behavior inventory test. Leary answered them in such a way that he seemed to be very conforming, conventional person with a great interest in forestry and gardening. As a result, he was assigned to work as a gardener in the low-security prison from which he escaped in September 1970, saying that his nonviolent escape was humorous prank and leaving a challenging note for the authorities to find after he was gone. This dude was a smart cookie, man, let me tell you. Next up, we have Charles Manson. As you know, everyone knows his story. Charles Manson, they got charged with the murders of Sharon Tate, and his crew and his cult got sentenced to prison. Everyone got like 25 years and all this crazy shit. He has a swastika on his forehead, and he was charged with 9 counts of murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and he was sentenced to death, but then that got commuted to life in prison. But he's dead now, so yeah, no more Charles Manson. That's the brief history on him. Next up, we have Eric and Lyle Menendez, dumbass 1 and dumbass number 2, who was convicted of murdering their parents, Jose and Mary Kitty Menendez, in Beverly Hills back in 1996, and they were both serving life without parole, and they are incarcerated at R.J. Donovan Prison. The damn Menendez brothers. Next, we have James Matos, who is James Matos. He was teaching Kenupo regularly, which is like a form of martial arts, I believe, regularly, and moved to Southern California. He probably taught a few students. In that time, one of the students' name was Terry Lee, known today as Namir Hassan, for about a year. But in 1974, he was arrested in L.A. and convicted of murder and extortion stemming from a conflict over a loan and the murder committed by Terry Lee, which was one of his students. So during the trial, there was conflicting testimony, and the court acknowledged that Japanese testimony had not been accurately translated. So, peep game. According to the trial transcripts, James denied inciting Lee to commit murder, but took responsibility as his martial arts instructor. Lee claimed James Matos had suggested on numerous occasions that Lee commit murder. Lee also testified that Matos and his wife Dorothy had given him a rope, a knife, a screwdriver, and an air pistol in order to carry out his actions. Mr. Namamatsu, who was killed by Lee on March 20th, 1974, the official cause of death was strangulation by rope. Namamatsu also suffered a completely collapsed eye and had been stabbed multiple times with a screwdriver and had a shoe imprint on his chest matching the shoes Lee was wearing. After the assault, Lee testified he had left Namamatsu breathing. As a result of Lee's testimony, Matos was sentenced to life in prison. He served the majority of his sentence at Folsom State Prison, but when his health deteriorated, he was transferred to San Quentin State Prison and then later died of complications from diabetes. So essentially, someone that he was teaching karate to went and killed someone and basically just said he showed him the techniques, and that's why he was in jail. It's a crazy, crazy situation, right? Next, we have Ed Morale, who was an accomplice to the Evans-Sontag Railroad robbers of the 1890s. That was the one that we just read about up above. Next, we have Bobby Purfy, who is the singer of the song I'm Your Puppet. Dun, 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 dun. I've been don't 10 times, don't me, I'm your puppet. I think that's how it goes. But it's not too much information on him. And then we have Shorty Rossi, star of Animal Planet's show Pit Boss. And basically, what he was involved in was a gang-related shooting and he was convicted of felonies, including attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. And he was sentenced to CYA and was later transferred to Folsom State Prison to serve a total of, get this, 10 years, 10 months, and 10 days. It's such an odd sentence. And then, last but not least, we have Danny Trejo, who was sentenced to Folsom Prison for selling heroin to an undercover agent, which to this day, if you ask him, he will tell you that it was brown sugar. Dude's always been a comedian. But anyways, I appreciate y'all for watching. Stay tuned for another episode, and let's keep it going, y'all. Lates.